If you don't already, spending some time warming up before you begin playing can benefit your gameplay in more ways than you'd think. Of course, it will help with being more accurate, having consistent builds, and not choking your edits as much. But warming up will also help you become a more consistent player throughout your entire play session and get you set up to play better than ever. We'll also be taking a look at some of the maps that I personally use to warm up for both editing and aim, but we'll also be going over some of the specific builds and such that I use for warming up with free building. Overall, we'll be walking through what I typically do while warming up, and we'll also be going over the main areas that you should be targeting to make sure that you have everything needed to be warmed up. I do just want to quickly ask you guys, if you do enjoy these videos or my content, to leave a like and subscribe, as it helps me create more content for you guys. If you want to support me even further, you can use code Selage in the item shop. Now, before we hop into today's video, I want to talk about G-Subs real quick, the healthiest and best tasting drink available. There's a wide variety of flavors such as green apple, OP orange, and dragon fruit punch. Don't forget to use code Selage for 10% off your order. To start my warm up, I'm actually not on Fortnite. I first load up Kovacs, but if you don't have Kovacs, don't worry. I'll be showing some maps in Fortnite that have sections that replicate exactly what you're going to be seeing me do in Kovacs. The reason I start with aim is just to get my mouse movement started. I usually begin with Tile Frenzy and do it until I get my typical score, or I'll just run through it until I feel comfortable. Which then I move on to Mini Tile Frenzy, which I only do a couple of times. I just like it because it helps with getting my micro movement down. These aren't the most efficient thing to train on usually, but it is a really good way to warm up as the first thing you do, as it kind of hones down your mouse movement to make sure you're not overshooting and undershooting. If you don't have Kovacs, there's this incredible Tile Frenzy map from RichyToons. This is an older map that you're seeing right now. He has a newer map available now, but when I was recording this video, it is a little bit bugged. In the current map you're seeing, there's also a section where you have to edit and shoot on different bots that are at different levels. It's a simple but fun section of the map that is great for just getting your basic edits and shotgun aim warmed up. But I'm going to be having his channel linked down in the description. I definitely recommend checking him out to see if he has his new version updated, or check out his other creations. He has some really cool stuff that are complicated beyond belief. Don't forget to check his channel out in the description below. After I do my Tile Frenzy, I then move into tracking, and in my opinion and many other pros' opinions, it's the most important skill to warm up and to train separately. You use tracking when shooting players out of the air, tracking someone while spraying them through builds, and even when you're going for consecutive shotgun shots, which in this meta with the combat and the drum shotgun, it's almost guaranteed you'll have to be tracking with any gun you use. So I like to spend a good amount of time doing both short and long strafe tracking until I reach my normal score, or if I still feel a little bit iffy, I'll spend another 10 or so minutes before moving on. On Kovacs, I just do the simple Ascended Tracking 3 while warming up, and I try to use the same course every time because that way you have a great way to gauge when you've reached your normal level of warming up in terms of the points Kovac gives you each run. That way you don't have to assign a set time on how long you warm up, because some days you can catch your stride much faster than others, and you may be warmed up in, say, half the time. Now again, if you don't have Kovacs, the best course I'd recommend would actually be my own aim facility map that I released a couple of weeks ago. Now I know it was super laggy on release, but I've broken the map down for you guys, so the only thing there is now is a rather optimized version that's left out some of the less important sections of the map. I've had friends who play on consoles so they get 50 to 60 FPS quite easily. If you struggle to get good FPS, I recommend running around the map and then respawning. It should help load in everything and keep your FPS a lot more stable. This map has two tracking sections however, one with long strafe and the other is a 360 tracking that combines both short and long strafe in a circular area. Both these are great and work similarly to Kovacs, but unfortunately there's no way to simulate the inconsistency and randomness that Kovacs provides. Otherwise, in this map there's another Tile Frenzy, one that is normal, and the other is a tracking Tile Frenzy, which is much harder than you may think. And it's actually pretty fun and is a great way to warm up on a decently hard course. The last type of aim that I sometimes like to train is flick shots or a shotgun aim and edit course. My map fortunately has both, and Kovacs unfortunately has neither, because it's kind of hard to replicate the shotgun spread that Fortnite has, and you can't really incorporate the edits and builds into it. If you run either of these on my map though, or both, you should have no problem getting your shotgun aim warmed up quite fast. Next up, onto editing, which typically is something that I spend the least amount of time on, as personally, after warming up my aim, I feel like my mouse movement is rather pinpoint, and I don't mess up too much on my edits. However, I still like to run through a course a couple of times to make sure that I have the most common edits warmed up. Luckily, I have another great map for you guys that solves a fundamental problem that I've always disliked. The fact that after you run through an edit course once, you know exactly what's happening the second time, and you remember quite a lot of the course to the point where nothing takes you by surprise. Luckily, my newest map solves that problem easily. Every time you run through it, it resets and generates a brand new randomized course for you to run through. With automatic reset and automatic randomization, it makes it super easy to run through the course fast and stress-free, as you can just load it up and crank some edits out. I run through 3 or 4 of these before heading into a free build world to crank out some builds. Now once you finally get into free building, there's a lot that you can possibly do, and it may seem difficult on what you should focus on, but there are a handful of builds that you should be focusing on the most. Of course, 90s are one of the simplest builds to practice, but I recommend always trying to combine more builds off the 90s. I usually like to include my high ground retakes and certain edits such as double floor cones off my 90s. I've said this before, but I think it's important. You need to get your fingers moving across your keyboard or controller as much as possible to make sure you're getting a good warm up by combining builds and edits together to maximize how hard you're pushing yourself to get a quality warm up. Another build that I always spend a lot of time on is tunneling, because there's quite a lot to it in terms of getting down builds in the correct order and placement to make sure you're covering yourself and editing through without mistake. Make sure while tunneling, you're editing on the left and right side. The difference between editing each side is pretty different for many things such as movement and how you're aiming to place each piece of the tunnel. So making sure that you're practicing and warming up both sides is important to make sure you'll be able to replicate it in game. Don't forget about diagonal tunneling, as it requires you to focus more so on the placement of your builds, and I also recommend incorporating normal tunneling by chaining the two together, as it's a great way to challenge yourself, as switching between the two types of tunneling isn't as easy as you'd think. And as I had already mentioned, challenging yourself while warming up will not only help you get better at certain builds and retakes, but it will also help keep you at the top of your game and staying up to date with the newest builds and strategies. Now to go into some more specificness with free building, I want to go over the specific technique of tunneling and as well touch on my 2 favorite high ground retakes that I usually work into my free building warm-up. For tunneling, it requires you to be precise on where you place your builds, and your crosshair placement is a great thing to acknowledge as well to make sure that you're not overestimating how far you're swinging to place on your builds. I'll show you a normal speed tunneling and as well a slow-mo version so you can see in depth how everything works. For high ground retakes, there are so many different ones you could possibly do, but my favorite are rather simple and practical in that they can be used in a ton of situations, and most importantly, are not overly complicated. So I know that if something goes wrong, I can easily switch what I'm doing, and I'm not going to be stuck halfway through a 15-step retake. Both retakes are great because you can use them in just about any situation, and that's what you should be aiming for with most of your high ground retakes. Having them be versatile and useful in just about any situation is important to make sure that you don't become predictable. For example, if you turtled and you only know one retake to get out of that situation, if you turtle again later on in the fight, they're going to know exactly what you're going to do and counter you much easier this time. The simplest retake is a side jump, but you can do it in so many different ways and combined with a huge amount of other retakes, and it can be done so fast that I think it is something you should most definitely be including into your warm-up in some version. There's at least 10 different ways to do a side jump, so finding one that you feel comfortable with shouldn't be too hard. Now, if you have the chance, say you're warming up to play duos, trios, or squads, I recommend trying to squeeze some 1v1s in after you've warmed up everything else. 1v1s are the best way to combine everything that you've been warming up all at once. But that's not the only thing they do. 1v1s also allow you to practice something that is impossible to practice with any training course or map, and that's real fighting engagements. There's no way to replicate the randomness that a real player can create, and of course there's no way to 1v1 build fight a bot. 1v1ing is by far the best way to close out a warm-up before hopping into a real game. This is where you can get the best practice and warm-up on your retakes and 90s, as you have to react and adapt based on how your opponent fights its situation. Warming up is crucial to playing well at any level of Fortnite, from pubs and especially into competitive play. Going into a game warmed up will make sure that you're fully ready to take on any fight you may have thrown at you. But will also help with your confidence, as if you go into your first game feeling good, the rest of that day are going to feel really great because your first couple went so well. They set the standard and overall can help you with not tilting and making sure that you're set up for success. Thank you guys for watching today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed all of it, and if you did, make sure to follow my Twitch and Twitter down in the description. I stream quite often on Twitch and tweet about my life and sneak teasers of my maps on Twitter. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more future tips, tricks, and tutorials. If you want some more right away, check out the playlist and videos on screen for some great way to elevate your game. Other than that, thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.